Hello and welcome to Something's Off with Andrew Heaton. I'm your host, Andrew Heaton, and you look fantastic. I love what you've done with your hair. Special shout out to my listener in Tasmania. Last night, one of the producers, Chris Cruz, he showed me that I can apparently see where downloads go. I don't know where you are in your house, mind you. Like if you're in your bathroom or something, I have no idea. I assume you're in your car. But I can see what cities are downloading it. And apparently we've got one guy listening to this fine podcast on the great island of Tasmania. And we've also got a whole squadron of people listening in Hutchinson, Kansas for some reason, or the Hutch, as the cool kids say. I would expect no less from a county smart enough to host the Kansas Cosmosphere and Space Center. Thank you very much for your service, Hutch. By the way, Something's Off with Andrew Heaton is brought to you by the unextinguishable log from Taylor Fuels. Try as you might, you can't put out one of Taylor Fuels' unextinguishable logs. That's the Taylor Fuels promise. They're so confident in the flammable nature of their product that you can do anything you want to try and extinguish it. Go ahead, pour a bucket of water on it. All you're going to do is piss it off. Whether you're camping in scenic Yellowstone National Park during the dry season, barbecuing in Southern California on a windy day, or operating your own unlicensed crematorium, you can be confident that the unextinguishable log will burn bright and true, even if you decide you absolutely have to put it out. The unextinguishable log has a shelf life of up to 6 years, well past that of a non-name brand log, and the quality of the fire, second to none. You'll look at those flames and say, that right there is premium, high-grade flame. No Craigslist fire here, no sir. The unextinguishable log from Taylor Fuels. We didn't start the fire, but we sure as hell can't put it out. Okay, before I bring on my guest, we're going to do something a little different and play a sermon from a local church. I'll be honest, I had misgivings about veering away from the program's spiritual neutrality. But I think that there are some interesting points that are made. So here's a brief sermon from Father Michael O'Grimsley. He is the vicar at the Church of Woke. Thank you. Please be seated. Today I should like to discuss with you the holy sacrament of offense. Are you being offended enough? Are you offended often enough? Sadly, the answer is almost certainly no. Being offended is how we signify we are part of the elect. Being offended reaffirms our group commitment to wokeness and parses the upright from sinners. But the sacrament of offense is more than that. Being offended isn't just how we become good and stay good people. It gives us holy license to be mean. If your car gets towed, you can't very well go to Starbucks and scream at the barista over the price of soy latte, now can you? That would be rude and inappropriate. But if your barista says girl instead of woman, or questions the cosmic truth that red hats are a form of hate crime, you are now completely at liberty to publicly shame this person and say hurtful, angry things you could never otherwise say in polite company. You might think, but I vote. Isn't that enough? Do I need to look for every offense in every conversation, commercial, tweet, and bumper sticker I'm exposed to? Yes, you do. Voting is a profound sacrament in and of itself, but until we reach that wonderful day when everything in life is constantly political, voting is a joy we experience only once every couple of years. We must vote every election, attend protest every Sunday, and be offended throughout the day, every day. Now let us all pick up our smartphones to go through Twitter, that we may intentionally seek out inconsequential strangers so that we might grow angry over their words and emote. Through the grace of Captain Planet and the interventions of the hierarchy of victimhood. Amen. My guest today is Rick Ungar. He is the host of The Rick Ungar Show and editor-in-chief at the Daily Centrist, and one of my favorite people. Rick, thank you for coming on the program.
It is my pleasure, my friend. How are you?
I am very well. I wish I could hang. I assume that you are in a fug of vape right now, as you are usually.
You know me.
like a vaping dragon. And you were one of my favorite people in general, but in media in particular. And for a while, you were my attorney. Do you remember that?
I do.
Yeah,
I actually do.
So Rick and I used to hang out because Rick is a media personality and pundit and analyst on a variety of platforms. And we used to hang out in the green room at Fox Business. And at one point, the show I was on was pretty much on the chopping block. And Rick very genially went, "What are you going to do when they can you?" And I went, "Rick, I can't talk to you right here. The building's probably bugged. Roger Ailes is still alive." And Rick went, "Give me $1." And I went, "Yeah, okay." And I gave him $1. He went, "All right, I'm your attorney now. You've got a client confidentiality." And that's how I got my first attorney. So it's good to have you on the program. And
I never sent you a bill. I got to rectify that.
Right. Well, I'm viewing it like a retainer.
I see. Okay.
And I did actually write you in for Attorney General of New York the first time I voted there.
Well, I was hoping somebody would. You were the one.
I was it. I was your demographic. I was the group. And I wanted to talk to you today because I follow you, and I read one of your articles recently.
I knew somebody was walking behind me. It was you.
I'm a one-man fan club. I'm going to try and link up with the other Rick heads, as we call ourselves. But you'd wrote an article about capitalism. I can't remember the exact title. I think it was that.
I can't either.
But it was basically, capitalism is bad for that, or capitalism in our country has gone bad, I think is a better way of phrasing it. And is socialism going to be the result from it? And you were planning on writing a multi-part series, but you were, I think you actually had a fairly similar assessment to my view, which is that markets are good and the free market is good, but there's a distinction between capitalism and crony capitalism. And you were bothered by how markets have kind of been co-opted or perverted by big interests.
Yeah, I certainly don't think capitalism is bad. I would have a heck of a time making that argument given my history. I am very supportive of capitalism. What I'm not supportive of is what I call perverted capitalism. Mm-hmm. And I certainly do not see socialism as an alternative to that, but I do worry if we continue on the track we are going, that could, in some degree, be the end result. What I consider to be perverted capitalism, you have to go back to what capitalism was designed to be. It was not a system and is not a system where it's winner take all. And that's how we play it these days. It's not winner take all. A successful capitalist system sees to it that various components of that system are treated fairly and reasonably. The most obvious example is you have an employer, you have a worker. Employers certainly ought to be getting the lion's share. They're the ones who are staying up, can't sleep on Thursday night because they got to make payroll the next day. That's worth a whole lot. But when you get to the point where the employers, or now, and we'll get into what I think is a big cause of this, which is the shareholder class, mm-hmm. when they become the focus, not that I object to them being a focus, but when they become the focus at the expense of the now third in the chain, the shareholder, the management, and then the worker, something's going to go seriously wrong. And that's where we kind of are.
So do you see that then? Because one of the examples you brought up in the article that I read was about Walmart and how yes. Walmart is on the one hand it's making prices very low, but on the other hand cut its employees' hours so that I think about half of them now are part-time. That way they don't qualify for benefits legally mandated by a full-time system. Right. Do you see that kind of thing? Do you see it as a moral failure or a cultural failure, or do you see it as a policy failure?
Well, it's kind of all of the same. I mean, there is the aspect of moral failure within capitalism. That strikes some people I know as odd, but there is. Look, here's what happens at Walmart, and you tell me. There are two things that make me crazy. You have a large segment, not everybody, but a large segment of employees at Walmart who are paid so little that they qualify for food stamps, which ironically tend to be spent at Walmart.
About 18% of all food stamps spent at Walmart.
But what makes me crazy about that is wait a second, the thing that we all go to work for, the most basic reason that we go to work is to have food, to eat. And yet Walmart, and I'm not counting their money, they are fabulously successful and good for them. But here's Walmart who are getting the benefit of those employee services, and you and I as taxpayers are feeding them. That makes no sense. The other problem I see there is that Walmart employs people. They actually employ people to help their employees navigate the Medicaid system. And I'm going, wait a second. You're employing people to help people figure out how to make sure that that Andrew and Rick pay for their health care. That's crazy. That makes no sense. It is a just an absolute perversion of capitalism. You either complete the circle of doing what you're supposed to do as a capitalist, or you punk out on that and you suffer the results. What's happening is Walmart, as just one example, has been shuffling off their part of the capitalist bargain, the responsibility. They've been shuffling it off to you and me and the rest of the American taxpayers. That's a perversion of capitalism.
See, where I tend to come in is the things that bother me the most, or at least I think can be dealt with the easiest, are when a corporation is able to co-opt force of government in order to cut out market competition, or in order to ensure that it's got some sort of guaranteed rent-seeking income and that kind of thing.
Well, that's crony
capitalism. Which is crony capitalism.
And that's certainly a different element of it, and it does exist, to be sure.
So you're coming more from the position of, I guess, sort of a moral responsibility as accompanying an employer status. With Walmart, just to give a little bit of gentle pushback, because I think Walmart gets a ton of negative responses to it.
That's what they say to me.
Well, but like people hate on Walmart, but I kind of look. And I used to hate Walmart. I look at Walmart now, and I'm like, it is making things cheaply available to so many people that are lower income. But wait,
let me just interrupt you there to point something out. They're making things cheaply available to workers who are being unfairly paid in other occupations, which is why they need to be able to get extremely cheap goods. You see the cycle,
and this is where we get into some of the deep underlying things. Like I think I buy into the Austrian school of economics with the idea that in a capitalist economy, the consumer is king. So the goal is primarily to make the price of goods low in order for people to acquire them. So it's
Yes.
less concerned with building up the chain of employer-employee relations as it is the end result of cheap goods, and then everybody can buy shoes and that kind of thing.
See, I have less problem with the Australian, the Van Mises approach to economics than I have with the Milton Friedman approach, because you talk about the morality issue. Well, prior to Milton Friedman setting everybody free to give up on morality, morality was a part of the capitalist system. It took Milton Friedman to say, wait a second, if you are a manager and if you are giving one iota of thought to anything beyond the shareholder, I mean, you are responsible to one thing and one thing only, and that is making sure you maximize profits for the shareholder. Now, when that became all the rage, that's when we really started to see income inequality. You can trace it. You can trace this to a few things. One was Milton Friedman. The other was the advent of the rush to the public markets back in the 70s. You'll recall everybody kind of figured out at once, and that's kind of how these things happen, that, wait a second, I want to grow my business. Well, everybody wants to invest out there in the stock market. I'm going to go do a public offering. And that's terrific. I'm glad that opportunity is there then and now for business. The problem is that when stock options, and I'm being a little bit hypocritical here because I was a great beneficiary of stock options when I ran a New York Stock Exchange company. Stock options came into play. The salaries were getting too high for the markets to defend. So what do? They start giving their top management stock options.
Hold on. So Rick, I want to pause you for a moment because I want to unpack a few things. Milton Friedman is my dashboard saint.
He's my dashboard villain.
Okay, so I'll say here's what I like about Milton Friedman, in that I feel like he was able to demystify. He took, I think, kind of public choice and went a step further, or presaged it, where this idea that if someone is in government, they're not automatically going to be a selfless Vulcan, and that there are going to be inefficiencies and problems in government that aren't necessarily going to react in the private, or that aren't going to work the same way the private sector. So I feel like he was very good at parsing out that which should be handled by the private sector and that which should be handled by the public sector. I'm less familiar with him as a sort of amoral force within economics. That's not to say he wasn't. I'm unfamiliar with that. I know him more as the free to choose guy.
Very, very, very much so. And you're right. Part of the Milton Friedman philosophy that we learned, and there were many, that is part of it. I don't have a problem with that either.
Okay.
I do have a big problem with this part of it. And if you look at the time where it came about, businesses were in a tough spot around that time. They were struggling for money. Business wasn't that good. We were having recessionary problems. And setting management free. And by the way, I talk about this in great detail in a book I'm writing called How the Harvard Business School Destroyed America.
I would love to have you back onto that. That seems like the variety of things we could jump into with that. That sounds terrific.
The Milton Friedman approach was adopted by the Harvard Business School, one particular professor who we'll leave out of this conversation for now. And it became the way that Harvard Business School graduates were trained, and they took that out into the American economy, and it has dramatically taken root. And you see that. And why is this now? Because management is directly tied with the shareholders through stock options. Hey, wait, if the shareholders are doing better, I'm a shareholder. I'm going to make a lot of money too. So when it comes time to decide, all right, do I want to maximize the dividend? Do I want to maximize the shareholder value? Or do I want to give the workers a raise? You know which one ends up winning.
What about like, because I don't think that American companies are monolithic. They do alter in terms of their corporate culture. They do alter in terms of the person running it. So like I look at like Howard Schultz and Starbucks. He seems to be a person who genuinely cares about his employees.
I agree.
They're offered. I think it's fairly a minimal amount of work you have to do in order to qualify for health care. They'll pay for your college.
That's correct.
Southwest Airlines, I think, has always had a fairly good.
Let me just say, I would tell you that Howard Schultz and Starbucks returns to the model of American capitalism.
So your premise is that American capitalism in its sort of its root form is both it's free enterprise with a sort of voluntary responsibility to the people involved?
Well, except I wouldn't use the word voluntary. I mean, all you have to do is go back to Adam Smith, who we all consider the father of capitalism.
We're actually having on PG at Work tomorrow to talk about Adam Smith. So it's
is that right?
funny you bring him up. Yeah.
You can bring this up because he did write fairly extensively about the responsibility to the workers and others within the structure of capitalism. His theory is very simple. If you continue not to take reasonable care of the workers, and again, I am not making an argument that they should be paid better than the CEO. I don't think that's the case. But if you don't take reasonably good care, then it's all going to fall apart. And what you get from people on the other side of that is, well, look, if the worker is not satisfied with what he or she is being paid, they have a solution. They can go look for another job. Well, as we all know, there have been too many times in our history where looking for another job wasn't even possible because there was no other job. Then we get to a time period like now where, thank goodness, we've got very healthy employment going on. But what you find is, as you said, no corporation in today's society is monolithic. So now everybody has a pretty good idea of what the other guy is paying. And so what do they do? And there are some exceptions to this. Costco, for example, does pay better and started paying better earlier than Walmart. But what happens is they don't want to pay anymore either. So that person comes looking for a job. Where'd you work? Well, I was looking at Walmart. Oh, and now you want to come here? Well, I know what Walmart's paying, and maybe I'll do a little bit better because I need people, but it's not going to necessarily reach that level of fairness. So people who object to this say, hey, the market determines what's fair. Well, but the market doesn't determine what's fair if the market's being unfair.
I think those are both good positions to have. Yes, the market, if it's being warped, is not going to operate fairly. And additionally, I think the idea that like starve or work is a false dichotomy. Where I come in is I think having more companies is better. Having more options for people to work at is always better. So it's better to grow the pie than it is to try and regulate people. While we haven't got into the specific policy prescriptions that you might do to try and rectify the extremities that Walmart's adopting with its employees, I worry that a lot of the time when we attempt to do such things, the regulation ends up getting captured by large companies anyway, and then regulatory capture further warps the field and insulates them. So what would you do to try and make this a more equitable system?
This is the problem, and your point is extremely well taken. When government does get involved in this, if they can even get involved with this, it has a funny way of not working out.
Yeah.
I absolutely
It'll
accept
wind up being
that.
Walmart will be just fine, but all of the mom and shop competitors will be subject to onerous regulations, and they'll go out of town, and then Walmart will be even bigger.
There you go. I mean, the ones that survived Walmart would be gone. I think that's an extremely fair point. This has to come from the companies themselves.
Okay.
So here's a policy that I would have done if I'm passing a tax cut for corporations, right? And Walmart, to continue with that example, and I know I'm coming down on Walmart, but there are certainly many others. But to continue the example, Walmart, we know, will benefit as a result of the tax cut to the tune of roughly $3 billion a year. Good for them. You know, I'm not sitting here saying, oh, that is horrible, right? Good for them. They're in business to make money and to make money for their shareholders. Good for them. But you know what you can do? You can attach something to that and say, if you're going to qualify for this tax benefit, then X percent of your EBITDA needs to go to either employee wages or employee benefits. That is how government can offer you a choice. You want this tax benefit? Okay. But we're going to see to it that part of that tax benefit goes to the employees. Now, government promised us that. You know that. We were promised by the president, we were promised by the Republicans in Congress that this was going to go to the benefit of employees. Mr. Hassett, who is, I call him now the smiling assassin, he runs the Economic Development Office over at the White House. He is a delightful guy. He is a nice guy, but he gets in front of that camera and he smiles and he says, this is going to mean $4,000 a year more in the pockets of American workers, and that's the low end. All right, I haven't seen anything close to $4,000 inuring to the pockets of the American worker. We have seen where most of that tax benefit has gone. It has gone for stock buybacks. Why do stock buybacks? Because that takes stock out of circulation, raises the price of the remaining stocks that are out there being floated, and that benefits management.
Generally, do you have a position on corporate tax rates? Did you think it was a good idea to pull them back?
You know what? I thought we got a little bit carried away, and only for one reason. The fairer way to approach this would have been basing it on the effective corporate tax rate, not the actual corporate tax rate, because there's a big disparity there. The corporate tax rate was what, 30-some percent? Mm-hmm. The effective rate was like 16%.
Right. Okay.
That's what people actually pay. So I didn't mind that corporations. I can buy into the argument that we were making our companies not competitive with others around the world. I don't know that I buy it 100%, but I don't think that it's an illogical basis. So no, I wasn't all that upset.
I'll add to that I think a lot of the time the corporate tax is used as a kind of stealth tax where a corporation doesn't eat. The people in it eat, right? The people that are working for it, but there's no organ that is a corporate organ. There is no brain that is a corporate brain. So when we do have a situation where someone goes, do you want to tax corporations more? The average American's like, yeah, I'm going to stick it to them. And it's like, well, what you end up doing is they just add that
they
tax.
Pass it along to you.
Yeah, they either pass it to you in terms of the purchase or the goods you're purchasing, or they cut it out of the employee's salary. So either way, I think a lot of the time it's a mirage in terms of beneficial taxation.
I think that's a very fair point. What went wrong, I mean, your scenario is set up extremely well. What went wrong here is government did contemplate that they were going to solve part of the problem of the employees being paid extremely badly. Again, I'll go back to Walmart. We know they don't pass things along to the consumer because they want to keep their prices down. They beat the crap out of the suppliers. I've been one of them, but that's okay. That's what they're there to do. That's where I look at it and go, that's capitalism in action. You want to beat up on me as a supplier so you can keep prices down for your customers. I get it. I get your motivation. It's on me to decide if the profit I may still make by supplying you at a lower price is worth it. That's capitalism, and that's cool. But when you make the employees unfairly pay for it, that's where we get into a problem. The government saw that. The Congress saw that. I even think the president saw that. And the solution was going to be, all right, you're going to have all this extra money because of tax benefits. Not only are you going to pay a lower amount, we're going to allow you to depreciate quicker. This is all going to be really good for you. We anticipate you are going to share that in some measure to get this income inequality problem underhand. They haven't done it. Yes, there are exceptions. There are exceptions,
but I'll say, like, getting back to it, like, and I think you've identified several problems. It's like, we're both free marketers, or we're both capitalists. We're both in favor of free enterprise as a system. There are going to be market failures. There are going to be people that are taking advantage of employees. It's not always going to be a complete cakewalk, right? Where I'm a little bit concerned is, I am worried about the efficacious nature of trying to legislate that away, because it sounds like
I get that.
The root problem that you're identifying, which I think is a fair one, is that if we step outside of the economic sphere for a moment, just into the civil sphere, you were at liberty to yell at people on the street or have an affair or whatever you want to do. It's legal for you to do it. Doesn't necessarily make it right. We generally live in a system in which we kind of walk both lines of, I am going to exercise my legal rights, but also there's a certain level of etiquette and decorum with which I'm going to compose myself. I'm going to do charity work. I'm going to volunteer, that kind of thing. So I see that in the economic sphere as well, and I think that that's a good point, that there are responsibilities you have towards both your shareholders and your employees and that kind of thing. But the kind of the deeper element that I'm skeptical of is, I don't think the government can impute that morality to a corporation through policy procedures.
I'm with you. Listen, I am a Democrat, but I am not one of those Democrats who believes for a minute that government can solve all these problems. This particular case is a good example of where government really can't solve those problems. You can legislate minimum wage, but even legislating minimum wage, and I'm supportive of that notion, but I think we chicken out and we get it wrong, because you and I both know that the minimum wage you need to just get by in New York City is a lot more money than the minimum wage you need to get by in other parts of the country. And if you're going to legislate minimum wage, you ought to make it specific to the region so that it's fair.
I'll say I'm going to agree with you insofar as, if you're going to have minimum wage, yes, it should be regionally varied. I think that ultimately the minimum wage is always zero in the event that you price people out of the labor market, which is why I'm fairly skeptical towards minimum wage legislation. But if you're going to do it, yes, Puerto Rico should not have the same federal like $15 minimum wage would ruin Puerto Rico. It would completely tank their economy.
It's completely fair. It should be regionalized. It should be realistic to where it's happening. So, but that is an example of where government can have an impact. There aren't too many other examples where government can solve this problem. One of them happened to be an opportunity when we did the tax cuts, which I'm very, very, very disappointed that nobody took up that opportunity. I'll tell you what, even a liberal like me, if the president had supported something like that, I would have been singing his praises on the radio every day. It would have been that significant, and he didn't do it, and neither did Congress, and that's deeply unfortunate. There are very, very few times where government can have an impact on this. So now you leave it to the companies themselves to make this horrible choice. Let's say, you pointed out earlier, you do have CEOs coming and going, et cetera. But when you have a CEO who comes, who may have a tinge of social responsibility, who may recognize what capitalism was meant to be, he or she has a big problem, because he or she might want to react to that and do the right thing, but he or she has a boss, and they're called the board of directors, who answer to the shareholders. So this is a critical problem. What you really have to do is get the shareholders of America to buy into the logic that if you continue to support this kind of income inequality, also that you can get a bigger dividend at the end of the quarter, and also your stock becomes worth more and more and more, you will eventually, and I believe this wholly, I don't know that we're there, but I believe this, you will bring down the capitalist system. It is not an accident that we are seeing this rise when you look at the polls of people who think that they believe in socialism. The reason I say think they do is most of them that I talk to don't even understand what socialism is.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you there. The amount of times I have to explain socialism is the nationalization of the means of production. It's a public ownership of the means of production. And there's so many people that are like, oh, it's sharing. And I'm like, nope, we're not.
Well, I'm talking about democratic socialism. Yeah. Well, democratic socialism isn't socialism.
Oh, so you mean a free enterprise system like Norway, which is less regulated than our economy, but you have more taxes and a broader social safety net? Okay. Well,
that's right.
Have that conversation. It's not socialism, though.
What those states have is a very well-developed welfare state.
Yeah.
What's happened
with a very low
regulatory
state.
Very much so. What's happened here, though, is the words welfare state has taken on this awful connotation. You hear welfare state, you're thinking bums. people who don't want to go to work, people who would rather play stickball out in front of the unemployment office and then grab their government check on my back. That's not what a welfare state actually is. The countries you just mentioned have been very, very successful with the welfare state. Most of these socialists don't know what it is.
I'll kick you a final question because I know that you have to leave here momentarily. Are you worried about the rise of socialism in the Democratic Party, given that you are a capitalist?
No.
No,
okay. I'm really not. And largely because, one, it's not socialism, right? And two, because I was a kid once. Right? I was a college student once. I had some pretty radical ideas when I was a college student. And like most people of my era, the baby boomer era, we all grew up to be the people we hated. Right?
So Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez will become the third Koch brother.
Yeah, of course. They're all going to do the same thing as they get older. Listen, I don't mind that. I really don't mind. I actually welcome people like AOC, who I don't think are going to ultimately have much of an impact, but I like that kind of thinking that pushes us to think some more about where we are. I think it's unfortunate when people take the lazy way out and they just make fun of AOC. You can figure out for yourself who that is. And I come down on her sometimes. I think some of the things she says are pretty stupid. But the fact that there are young people out there who see a different way, whether we ever get there or not, is a healthy thing. And I hope that they don't stop. But they are, just like I was at that time. And as I say, today I'm not that person anymore. Few of us are.
Well, Rick, I know that you've got a tight schedule. I appreciate you fitting me in. I always enjoy talking to you. I'm sorry we couldn't hang out in person because I enjoy your company tremendously.
Well, get your butt to New York.
I'll come. I'm going to be up there this summer at some point. I can
tell you, the bars have asked where you are. They miss you. Business is bad.
Several people are no longer able to send their kids to college due to the lack of gin that is coursing through my veins from New York.
They're taking it out on their bartenders because you moved away.
But really though, I thank you for coming on. I enjoy talking to you. I don't always agree with you, but I'll tell you, you're one of the most thoughtful, civil people I know, and I think you're also someone who's very much, you've got your perspective, but you're thinking for yourself. I never get the impression that you're
I don't do talking points.
Yeah, you're shouting up bumper stickers for some organization you're a part of or anything like that. If people want to listen to you more, where can they go?
They can listen to the Rick Ungar Show, and if it doesn't happen to be in a city where you live, not a problem. Go to rickungarshow.com. You will see stations listed there. You can click on any one of them to listen to the program. It airs from 6 to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday Eastern Time. Now, here's another place where you can get it, and I just know that your audience is going to rush to download this app, Andrew.
Okay.
Progressive Voices.
There's you know what, if you're making a Venn diagram, Rick, that is just the giant overlap. Well, hey, thank you so much. I'll be in New York this summer. Let's hang out either way, and if we can do it, let's talk about your book.
You got it.
Okay, thanks, Rick.
All right, man. Take care.
Before I bid you adieu for today, remember that you can always tweet me at Mighty Heaton or Facebook me at facebook.com/Mighty Heaton, or even email me by subscribing to my newsletter at mightyheaton.com and just replying when I send it out on Fridays, except for last Friday when I did not. So if you have access to a time machine, do not go back to the previous Friday hoping that you'll read my newsletter. Simply wait it out and you'll receive one in the near future. And then you can respond to that in kind if you want. I actually handle my social media. I've been trying to outsource it to a country. I'm not going to mention which one, but we've been running into some legal problems. So as of now, I've got to handle that stuff myself. If you subscribe to the podcast and you want to see what I look like, you could go to Facebook Watch, too. If you went to Facebook Watch, you can see clips from the show and also check out my handsome mug. But this begs a bigger question, I think. Have you subscribed to this podcast yet? I subscribe to your podcast, and you might be thinking, I don't have a podcast. Heaton's lying. No, you're wrong. I created a podcast for you, dear listener, and then I subscribed to it. That's how close we are. Don't make this a one-sided relationship, okay? We both have to work at it. So please, subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. That helps other people discover this here political orphanage. Good night, Hutchinson, Kansas. Thank you.